I really try to not look at myself as just a science teacher. I feel like as a teacher, it's very important to help students grow and develop outside of your lessons. A single teacher believing in you and really believing in you. One teacher doing that can have a large impact, but if you have one or two or three all telling you that and really, really believing in it, it makes you feel like you can achieve anything in the world, honestly.
Welcome to today's keynote session. My name is Shelly Gonzalez, and I'm the Executive Director for Program Delivery at Teach First, and I'm delighted to introduce you to our keynote session on tackling racial injustice in education and beyond. I'm here representing Teach First and our partner schools, and I'm pleased to share a little bit more information about what we do as an organization and why today's topic is so important to us. So you're joining our keynote, Tackling Racial Injustice in Education and Beyond. And today you'll hear from the next generation about their experiences of racial inequality within education and beyond, and what we can do to change it. Our chair today will be Russell Hobby, the Chief Executive Officer at Teach First, and we'll be joined by three brilliant speakers, all I Will ambassadors from UK Youth, Claire, Sadia, and Adam. Let me tell you a little bit about the I Will Ambassador movement. This campaign focuses on how young people have the energy, skills, and ideas to change society and the environment today and in the future. These young people share a vision with partner organizations that all children and young people should be supported and empowered to make a positive difference on the issues that affect their lives, their community, and broader society. Let me also tell you a little bit about our work at Teach First. Our mission is to build a fair education for all pupils, not just some. And it's a sad fact that a child from a disadvantaged background is less likely to get good GCSEs and go on to higher education. The effects of this slow start can last a lifetime, widening social inequality. Now, over the last couple of years, we've seen the devastating impact of school closures and the inequalities still faced by many in education and beyond. This all means that many students and their families will be concerned, and rightly so, about what lies ahead. Our education system is the best tool we have to mitigate some of these daunting challenges, and it must be supported. And it will be on all of us to work together to overcome these challenges. This issue is so critically important, and until we ensure our schools are truly inclusive, education won't be fair for all. We need to make sure that pupils from all backgrounds can thrive, but we know that the system is rigged unfairly. We're part of that system, and we have the power to change the bias that sometimes lives within the system, its processes, as well as our own personal assumptions. But challenging racial discrimination is not enough. We need our school environments, including all of our leaders, our teachers, and our pupils together to be actively anti-racist. Our schools can change lives, which is why it is vital for our schools to be inclusive, to provide the best learning experience for all pupils. Yet research from the YMCA tells us that 95% of young Black people in the UK have heard or witnessed racist language in their school. And according to Bernardo's, Black Caribbean children are 3.5 times more likely to be excluded from school than all other children at primary, secondary, and in special educational needs schools. One of the further challenges we face is representation within our staff at school. Particularly, 1 in 4 pupils in England are from ethnic minority backgrounds, yet only 6% of school leaders are Black, Asian, or minority ethnic identifying. This is an important priority area for us at Teach First, but it's important that we begin to improve ourselves before we simply comment or express views about the wider system. We still have so much to do, but we have made a start. We've launched our Missing Pages campaign to address the lack of diverse texts within the curriculum, which reflect the experience of people from Black, Asian, or minority ethnic backgrounds. Pupils in England can leave school without having read a single book by an ethnic minority author, and we want to ensure that these voices are heard, valued, and amplified. So we've created resources and webinars supporting teachers who wish to diversify the texts that they offer. We've also overhauled content on anti-racism across all of our programs. We've run the Future Terms event on becoming an anti-racist school and delivered training as part of our MPQ and Careers Leaders Conference on the same topic. We also continued to recruit trainees through our flagship training program, and we've worked hard to make sure that our selection process and the training is reflective of the schools in which trainees will teach and the communities where they will serve. What now? There's so much more work to do to make education fair, which is why we're building a manifesto, a to-do list, if you will, to clearly outline what needs to be done to make our education system work better for the children who need it most. But we don't have all of the answers, which is why we're gathering feedback from teachers and leaders on the front line to inform our next steps. Inclusive teaching and diverse leadership are 2 of the key areas we're looking at, but there's so much more for us to consider, which is why we want you to tell us what you think of our proposal to make the UK's education system work better for the most in need. We are listening, so please visit teachfirst.org.uk/haveyoursay to share your thoughts. Well, you've heard enough from me. I'm really looking forward to today's keynote session, and all that remains is for me to hand over to Claire, Sadia, Adam, and Russell. Thank you for your time and enjoy the session.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Russell. I'm Chief Exec at Teach First, and I'm joined on this conversation by Claire, Lanai, and Sadia, who are going to introduce themselves in a little bit more depth very shortly. The topic of our conversation is tackling racial injustice in education. The topic of race has been on all of our minds recently, and for many people, it's been on their minds for a lot longer than that. There are some recent events that have brought the conversation into greater prominence as it affects the education system. And over the last few years, as we consider the events leading up to and surrounding the killing, the murder of George Floyd, if we think about the Sewell report, which I think was basically an act of saying nothing to see here when it comes to race within this country. And even this week, the somewhat contested report of the Education Select Committee, which was claiming that a focus on racial justice had distracted us from improving educational outcomes for white working class in a way which sets up different disadvantaged groups against each other. It seems like this is an absolutely vital topic for us to be discussing. And manifestly, my voice is not the most important voice in this debate. And my perspective is limited, as is my expertise on this issue. Over the last year or so, it has been my privilege to learn from and alongside some brilliant young people with lived experience of these issues, who in their various ways have helped me understand both the very real prevalence, the reality of racism within our education system and the impact that it has and the enduring impact it can make. And although that has been very challenging and at times a very saddening discussion to have, these conversations have also filled me with a great deal of hope at the determination of the rising generation to tackle these issues. So I'm therefore chairing a conversation and looking to facilitate your questions as well with three of these brilliant young people, Claire, Lanai, and Sadia. It does take, I think, a huge amount of courage to step up on a public platform and share experiences which are deeply personal as well. And I just wanted to recognize that. And I'm really confident that you will respect that in the questions. And we would really encourage your questions and welcome them. And I will do my best to respect that as well. My experience so far is that although I think we do have many blind spots, there are so many educators who are really eager to learn and understand and to improve, which I think in itself is grounds for optimism. So I think you had the instructions in the run-up video, but you can leave your questions on slido.com and they will start to rack up, and we'll see which are most popular, and I shall try and channel those into the conversation. Let me also say that while I think that the voice and the perspective of young people, both within and coming recently out of the education system, is central to this, and that I hope that they are active agents in changing the future, correcting the mistakes of the past is not their burden or responsibility. It is ours who are operating the system. And when I asked Claire, Sadia, and Lanai what they would like from this conversation, one of the things that they talked about was action. As well. I mean, it is important that we debate and reflect and we learn, but it should lead to something as well. So I'm going to see if we can steer the conversation in that regard. So enough from me. I said I wasn't the center of this, so let's stop hearing from me now. And let's hear from each in turn. Claire, just to give you a warning, I'm going to come to you first. Just ask for a quick introduction to yourself, where you come from, but also your views on this topic. Start setting out the stage for us. So Claire, over to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Claire. I am a first year college student, so I'm in year 12. The last few years have showed me a lot about the way that the people around me have dealt with racism. There are so many experiences that I realized I had suppressed because no one had given me the right terminology to define them with. Or I hadn't recognized those things as microaggressions, or because I'd been so used to them, I just thought they were normal. This year is the first year that I am going to an actually diverse school. Throughout my entire life, I've gone to predominantly white schools, and because no one is having those conversations about racism, you don't really understand what's going on until you reflect back. And for a lot of young people of color, it takes a lot of courage to recognize those experiences, to recognize the people around you who have been forcing you into this position. And I'm just so happy that we're able to come together and have the first of many conversations to come about this topic.
Thank you, Claire, for starting us off on this. Lanai, I should note that you stepped in onto this conversation at the last minute, so we're very grateful for that as well. So thank you for doing that. Let us know who you are and what you're thinking about this topic.
So hi everybody, I'm Lanai. I'm really grateful to be here again with Teach First. It's been a real pleasure to have this opportunity with them to speak about something that has defined a lot of my life. And so this feels like a real opportunity as well for me to not only raise awareness about anti-Black racism, but also to kind of heal from my experiences and feel like going through some struggles can now be worth it for the fact that I can try and make sure that next generations don't have to experience certain things that I did. I'm currently studying children's nursing at university, and I was nominated to be a #IWill ambassador about a year ago. And that's what's brought me to this platform, because IWill created a Black ambassador group for us due to the re-emergence of the Black Lives Matter movement. And we've also, the three of us as well, have worked alongside UK youth as well with their #Young and Black campaign, which has also been amazing. And they've got some incredible resources out that I highly recommend for after you've listened to us. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you for that, and thank you for just reminding me of how we met and how we came to have these conversations through the I Will campaign, which I think is now working through UK Youth, isn't it? As part of it, inheriting that as you've set out. But that was a huge campaign to raise awareness and start conversations like this. So great reminder. Sadia, let us know who you are and where your thoughts are on this topic.
Hello everyone, my name is Sadia and I'm based in Wales. I currently am studying at university. I just finished my first year, and outside of my studies, I'm a podcast host, and I set out on a mission to just empower, uplift and inspire my peers to just believe in themselves and pursue their dreams. And that's why I'm here today, because I feel like, you know, my experiences have brought me to where I am today, and you know, the experiences that we have really do shape us in a positive way or in a negative way as well. And it's important that we speak about these things. You know, when I was growing up, I had to understand very, very quickly that I was going to be treated differently. I could never understand. Now I can understand, and just having that understanding helps, because then you're able to share that understanding with other people and help other people as well. But also you can impact change as well. And so having conversations are important. Having conversations with the right people are important, and having conversations that lead to action, which you already mentioned, Russell, is also very important, because, you know, as young people, we can get very tired about speaking about our experiences. I know I've been speaking about my experience for a very long time, and so what I really want to see is just action, and that's what I'm working on right now here in Wales with the Welsh Government. They have, you know, they're currently working on their Race Equality Action Plan, which outlines the vision for Wales to become an anti-racist country by 2030. And so just being involved in that work has helped a lot, because then my experiences and my insights of hopefully helpful in creating the change that we want to see. So yeah, that's me. I'll pass it back over to you, Russell.
Thank you. You recently sent me a report from the work that you're doing in Wales in terms of some of the conversations and conclusions that you'd reached. Are you able just to quickly sort of summarize some of the key themes that were coming from that? Because I thought, you know, in the spirit of action, there was some clear suggestions in there. I thought it was a very powerful report. So what were the main messages coming out of that?
Yeah, so the report, it came out of a peer research project, you know, for those that aren't familiar with it. And so the peer research project, we looked into the direct and the indirect experiences of racism of young people in Wales, in the Welsh education system. And so, you know, the last question that we were asking the young people from the interviews was like, what is it that you want to see? What are the changes that you want to see in the education system? And it was things like a more inclusive environment. It was things like, you know, better policies and better procedures in terms of, you know, tackling racial inequality. You know, a lot of schools, you can say, have a no tolerance policy towards bullying, but you don't have the same for racism, and that's completely different. And it's important to have that message in schools that, you know, racism isn't tolerated as well. So that was another thing. What else can I think of? You know, here in Wales, it's not as diverse as, you know, England, you can say. And so a lot of young people wanted to see more diverse, they wanted to be taught by more diverse teachers from more diverse backgrounds. So that was another thing. Just more support as well, more support for young people that did have experiences of racial inequality, because as I mentioned before, it impacts young people in many different ways, whether it's through mental health, even their, you know, academic their academic studies. It impacts them in that way as well. And so just better support in that sense. I'm trying to think if there were so many there were so many recommendations, which is really, really great. I know one another recommendation, and this will be the last one that I'll share with you, was that, you know, young people wanted exams to be completely anonymous. So within schools, I guess, for exams to be anonymous, and that way, you know, you can kind of eliminate unconscious bias and stereotypes as well. So those were some of the recommendations that came from that, and it came from those young people. Oh, Russell, you're on mute.
I am. I'm pressing too quickly. That seems like a good number of recommendations to be getting on with, and also very topical in terms of the relationship between, say, teacher assessment and examinations, which we're right in the middle of as a sector at the moment, with exams being cancelled. So I think what I would like to get into, and I think this is a very challenging and possibly quite a broad question, but we need to understand what is the impact of racism in school and in the university sector on you. What has stood out from you in your experience so far, and how has it shaped you? You've talked about carrying things with you, and I can sense that and see it. So I'd like to understand, and I admit this might be hard to unpick, but I would love it if we could hear more about what does stand out for you about the sort of typical incidents that are furthering this discrimination in schools. Lanai, would you be willing to start us off on that one?
I think Claire was ready, so I'm going to go to Claire.
Okay.
All right.
Well spotted, Claire.
So I remember throughout my education, there would be incidents of racism where they would, for example, students being called slurs by other students. And because the students, usually Black students, wouldn't know who to go to, those experiences would be swept under the rug. And for a lot of students, that trauma gets held with them, and it really shapes the way that they look at themselves and their identity. I'm based in Manchester, so I guess, like, compared to the rest of the Northwest, we're more diverse, still some way to go. But I just remember even teachers, I remember students like enforcing stereotypes onto the very few teachers who weren't white, and just seeing like the light in their eyes fade. I think when you see someone that you look up to go through something like that, it just makes you feel like there's no hope, that this is something that you're just going to have to experience and that there's going to be no change in it. I remember I had a teacher who had a quite strong Nigerian accent, and the students would just make fun of him all the time. And I remember just feeling so like I didn't know what to do, because even though I wasn't the target of that aggression, I felt like I had been attacked too. And I think that's something that not enough people talk about. When you see other students facing those experiences, you feel attacked too, even if you aren't the direct target of that aggression. Even something simple as the books that we were reading. Throughout my years of education, I've read one piece of literature by a black poet, and it was just about slavery, essentially. And reflecting back on that, I was just like, so that was it. That was our one piece, so that we could just shut up, and that was our representation. And we read so many books about different cultures around the world, but they were written by poets, by writers, by authors who had never even experienced it. And thinking about that now, it doesn't make much sense. Why would you get someone who has never spoken French to teach a French class, and to get someone who is not of that culture to reflect on it? It doesn't make sense. And I just think in general, there needs to be a lot of reflections over the literature that we teach our students, because the education system is supposed to educate students. And if you don't do that correctly, they become uneducated adults who think that they're educated.
I want to return to the topic of representation in what is taught in depth, actually, but a very profound point there, I think, on the way adults are treated inside school as sort of setting a tone as well, and how they're treated by each other and by the student, and what is permitted within the school as well, which I think is hugely important to us. Sorry, Claire, did I interrupt on that, or did you have more to say?
No, perfect. Thank you.
Great. So Lanai, I will come to you. I will come to you now because you're looking ready for it. So your perspective on that.
So systemic and institutional racism infects every inch of the UK. And I could sit here and give you statistics and testimonies to back that up. But at the end of the day, we know it's real, and that's the only facts that I need. And I think sitting here and giving you the statistics of disproportionate exclusions and things like that only perpetuates this narrative that we cannot achieve, which is just not true. And I think that's part of the problem with learning such a small part of our history, because it reduces us to that, opposed to actually the massive community we've had that the UK simply could not survive without. And I don't say that lightly. A few days ago, we celebrated Windrush. What would we have done without the Windrush community from the Caribbean, Africa, India, that came over to help build the UK back up, that is still here now? You kind of get my point. Mm-hmm. So I think during school, it was really difficult because even using the terms microaggressions, they're not really micro. These comments, slurs, it's all racism, and it all impacts us in such kind of extreme ways. When you're in school, it's secondary socialization. That's such a significant part of your development in adolescence, such a significant part of your life. You spend more time at school than you are at home. And so I was spending more time at school being in kind of a place where I was experiencing lots of racism that I couldn't exactly articulate, than being at home in the safety of my culture that was empowering me. And so I think, and also the fact as well that I'll comment on, that I'm a dual heritage Black woman. And so my experiences will differ to a Black woman of a darker complexion. And there's so many differences between us. We cannot be grouped together. Whether we grow up in a rural area compared to a city, will have different experiences. But at the end of the day, we're all fighting for the same thing, and we're all fighting for the fact that racism is unacceptable. And the last thing that I'll kind of mention on the experiences in school specifically as well, which I think we find difficult to talk about, is also the sexualization of Black women. And that really impacted me as well, because again, you're going through puberty during that time, and all of these negative stereotypes can be really, really damaging. And I think for me, teachers just couldn't handle it. They didn't know what to do. And often when people would make comments and racist comments towards me, I would be the one to be sent out of class. I would be the one to get into trouble, which still impacts me today, because anytime I want to report racism, I think, well, is it me? Am I overthinking this? And that's really difficult. So yeah, Sadia, I don't know if you want to continue.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I think for me, in primary school was very different to secondary school, and both of the schools that I went to, I was one of the only, you could literally count the students of color there. So I think in primary school there was like maybe less than 5 students throughout the whole primary school, less than 5 students, from that were Black, for example. And in primary school, I saw that, the experiences that I had, they weren't taken seriously. So even when I did speak up, even when I did take my parents to school with me, they weren't really taken seriously. And for me, it was like a double-edged sword, because I started wearing the headscarf at a very young age as well. So from primary school. And so if you can imagine, when there were like very big incidents, like terrorist incidents, going into school and then being attacked by other children, and just not understanding why you're being attacked, or even being attacked by parents as well. And again, the school, their action wasn't serious. I'd say they didn't take the right action. Then going into secondary school, it was very different. So even though I went to a school where, again, I was like literally one of the only Black students in the school, I could see that there was a zero tolerance policy towards racism, because whenever I would have any sort of experience and go and report it, action was taken. And then that meant for me that then whenever I found myself in a situation like that, I can speak up, and I can speak up about my experiences, and I don't have that fear that, my experiences won't be taken as seriously. And I know that's not the case for many of my peers. In terms of the way that, those incidents impacted me, I'd say I internalized a lot of those experiences. So yes, even though I was able to speak up about those experiences, I internalized a lot of those experiences and ended up having a lot of issues in terms of self-worth and low self-esteem. And I think it was only very, very recently, actually, where I had that reflection and just realized that a lot of the issues that I had in terms of low self-esteem and self-worth, it probably came from a lot of those experiences. Because another thing as well, throughout school, I was always trying to just prove myself. So always putting a lot of pressure on myself to kind of overachieve, because then I was trying to not just prove to myself, but prove to, whether it was teachers, whether it was people around me, and that break that stereotype that, I am a good student. And so that meant that I put a lot of pressure on myself. In that impact then ended up being on, my mental health. So it's kind of like a domino. It's a domino effect, and it impacts, people differently. But that was my experience. And having conversations are very, very important, because then just understanding this, it meant that I could unpack a lot of those things, and and learn a lot of those things, and put a lot of work into myself, and then actually empower myself, and actually tell myself that I am a good student, and you're meant to love learning, and you're not meant to hate it, or it's not meant to be something for you to value yourself in. Regardless, you're still who you are, and your education, it doesn't define you in that way. So yeah, I'd say in a nutshell, that was like my experience, and that was those were the ways that it impacted me personally.
Thank you for that. And I think some of what you said there built on something that Claire said earlier about the importance of language and concepts around this, to be able to identify it as something that's happening to you rather than something that you are bringing to it, so that then you can have that process of understanding it as well, which I think is powerful. And we've all talked about the importance of action here. It's a very simple thing, but if I listen to this, as institutions, having a process for taking concerns and complaints seriously, it just seems to be just such a fundamental building block of this, that and made a significant difference in your experience. And Lana, I think some of the things that you were bringing in there about the importance of the fact that everybody has very different experiences, and none of you on this call are representing a community broader than your own perspectives within this. You cannot necessarily speak for other people, and yet at the same time, how do we focus on the common injustices and work together as part of that? Because there are definitely forces that would rather people thought about their differences and the conflicts between them, rather than what we all have in common to change this as well. So I think there's some vital themes there. We've got some questions coming in, and I want to sort of prepare the ground for the first one with just one more of my own here, which because I don't want the whole burden being on how people who experience racism should deal with it. I think it should be how we stop people from experiencing it as much as possible. So what I am interested in is almost the flip side of what we've just spoken about is where have you seen this tackled well, if at all, in your experience? What are the elements which have worked from your point of view that we should build on and expand? Who would like to start us off on this one?
Russell, do you mind just repeating your question again? That's okay.
Not at all. I'm interested in where you've seen institutions like schools or universities tackle racism properly in your view, where you think these injustices have been handled well. It could be small components, specific events, or larger themes. It may be that you can't think of any, which in itself would be an interesting finding. Did that make sense as a question? So who shall I pick on? Shall I pick on someone? Claire, shall I pick on you to start with?
This is kind of a hard one, actually. I think the best way for me to go about it is to compare what it's like going to a diverse place of education now compared to previous years. Something as simple as learning how to pronounce your students' names correctly makes such a big difference. We've been wearing masks from September, but yet our teachers still made an effort, even through the piece of fabric, to make sure that they spell our name correctly, that they say our names correctly. And our names are a part of our identity. And for a lot of people, they link directly back to their culture, to their heritage. And it's just a sign of respect to call someone by their correct name. And I remember in primary school and high school, how uncomfortable I would feel when someone said my name wrong. I have my last names they are not phonetically English, so they use Shona phonetics. And I remember just being like a little animal in a zoo where teachers would spend a good 10-15 minutes getting the whole class to try a go at saying my name, and it just made me so uncomfortable, like unprovoked. Just everyone look at Claire and let's try and say her name even though she didn't ask you to. And it's just stuff like that just made me things like that made me feel I guess less connected to my name. And for a long time, actually, I would just let people say the anglicized version of my name. And it's embarrassing, actually, to look back at it. But something as simple as knowing someone's name makes such a big difference. And that's a simple action that anyone can take.
That's something within the power of every single one of us to get right. And of significant importance as well. So thank you. Sadia, from your perspective, what helps in this regard, and what have you seen that works?
Yeah, when you first asked the question, I was struggling a bit because I couldn't think of, I really couldn't think of anything that I thought, okay, like this worked well. But the only thing that I could really think about, at the beginning, I mentioned just having inclusive spaces for your students, because that sense of belonging is so important. Like Lana, I mentioned, like we spend majority of our time in school, and so when we feel like we don't belong and we feel like outcasts, then it's a big issue, and it does impact us a lot. And so I remember when I went to college, and college was more diverse, and I'm Muslim as well. And so one thing that I really, really liked is just like the college had a space for us to actually just go and do our prayers during the day. And because I went to different campuses as well, I saw that the prayer rooms were in majority of their campuses. And so just talking about like inclusive spaces, that was just one thing that I really appreciated a lot. And actually going back to secondary school as well, it was something that, my parents spoke to the school about. And even though the school didn't have a lot of Muslim students, they were still able to accommodate that for us. So it's just having that, like being listened to, and then action being taken. That's something that always, as students, I think it is something that always puts us at ease, because we know that if we take the courage to speak, then we're going to be listened to and we're going to be taken seriously. So I think that's the only example that I could really give in terms of my experience.
And that is a helpful example. I think the fact that this is a hard question to answer is quite interesting in its own right as well. Lanai, are you anything you can add to this?
Just the fact that I would say safeguarding is really, really key. I can't stress it enough. Obviously, due to what's been happening, we're much more aware now of anti-Black racism, but don't go into something and try and make lots of groups or try and do lots of campaigns if actually you don't really know what you're doing and you're using Black trauma in order to raise awareness of something, or if you work in a school, what you're doing in order to make yourself feel more comfortable that you're taking action against racism is actually damaging the students that need you the most. I think, we never get any time to heal as Black people, because even when the pain is too hard to conceal, we have to keep going. We have to keep coming to school, keep working, because there's not another option. And so just simply be considerate about that, because it is really difficult, and safeguard those students when they come into school or they're having a hard time. Don't be so harsh on them, because you don't know what they're going through and how they're dealing with what's out there in the media. So just be kind. That's it.
Helpful advice for schools and teachers. There's a question come in on which I think builds on a point that I wanted to return to. What changes would you like to see in the curriculum and what is taught in schools to make them more inclusive? And I think I remember also from previous conversations, and Claire, you raised this around the balance between finding elements to celebrate and be proud of while not ignoring struggle and injustice at the same time. And you've also spoken a lot about listening to the voice of people who have experienced that. So I think there's themes within there, but I would love to hear sort of more expanded views on how you would like the curriculum to change. Let me see who's I'm sort of switching between views here so I can read the questions. Who's unmuted themselves to give me a signal? So Lana, you remain unmuted. Come straight back in on that question.
So I think we'll all agree that in school, it's heavily focused around slavery, but it's focused on the slave trade, not enslaved people who can't really be traded because they're humans. So even how we talk about slavery is wrong to start with. And I think it's taught in a way where it's kind of like this happens and it's done now, when it's something that continues to impact us today. And respectfully, having a white teacher tell me about that was highly, highly uncomfortable. And I just remember I didn't want to learn about my community, because every time it was mentioned, I could feel the burning eyes on me, like, oh, that woman's hair's like yours, and all of this kind of thing. And I think the only time I ever got to really express my culture was in sixth form, when I was given an opportunity to speak about Rastafari liberty and do a presentation to my class. And I don't think the teacher ever knew how impactful that was for me, because my whole schooling, I've never had a chance to actually tell people that dreadlocks what they meant to me and about my culture, and instead through school it was kind of like, you can imagine the difficulty around that, and the fact I was given a platform to educate others was the most powerful, because we know best, and I think nothing about us without us is so important. And this is why, although we are talking a lot recently about white working class boys, yes, they face many struggles, and yes, there are struggles due to poverty, due to loads of different things, but the thing is, we are not afforded their privilege of being empowered about our culture, learning about our kings, our queens, who we really were, and even learning only about the struggle against racism in America. There was so much going on in the UK, the Bristol bus boycott, for example. And so it's important for me, the thing that I'll end on is that in school, teachers from very young age, even in nursery, I remember you kind of have those lessons where it's like, you can be whatever you want to be, dream as big as you can. You want to be an astronaut, you can be an astronaut. But how can we confidently tell our students that until the world values their achievements and potential over a negative prediction due to characteristics they cannot control? And that's really important to me. And there's a quote from Bell Hooks, who, again, I'll recommend her as someone to look into if you want to learn about racism. But she says, "I believe that this nation can only heal from the wounds of racism if we all begin to love Blackness." And by that, I don't mean that we love only that which is best within us, but that we're also able to love that which is faltering, which is wounded, which is contradictory and incomplete. So love Blackness and don't stop. Black Lives Matter is not a moment, it's something we have to continue. So please continue to fight for us, really.
There's so much in there to draw out and learn from, that it's not just a matter of history, although that matters. Living culture and pride in the culture and achievements, not what's being done to a community, but what the community has done themselves is so important. The whole angle of just talking about it in terms of a trade with slavery versus the people within it, and who should never have experienced that, who teaches as well as what is taught to both the teaching body, but enabling students themselves to teach us in return. There's so much we could develop from that. Claire or Sadia, who would like to come in next on this topic? Claire, you've you launched this off as well, so say more.
First of all, I'm not sure I'm supposed to follow up after Lanai, but I have like a long list of things that we need to change. I think in literature we should be reading books and poetry by Black authors, Black poets, Black playwrights, because when you actually see that there are successful people who look like you are empowered by that. Instead of just telling students that you can do anything, give them examples, show them people before them who've actually gone and been successful. I think, I remember a lot of, when we would study politics and debating, I remember teachers telling us that we should remove ourselves from it. But I think that can be really harmful, because a lot of the topics that you do end up covering are central to people's identity. It is not fair to tell someone that they shouldn't be offended when you are trivializing their rights and their existence. And I think there needs to be more respect in that regard, because I think it comes from a place of privilege for you to be able to have political discussions where no one is affected whatsoever. And I think also when we credit educators and poets and all of those good creators, we need to make sure that the work that they are doing is positive for all communities. I remember studying so many powerful leaders and then finding out that they were racist afterwards. And it hurts a lot, because to admire someone and realize that if they were alive, they would not have admired you back whatsoever, that they were infringing on your rights and every meaning of the phrase. It's a punch to the face, really. I think if we're going to be uplifting people, we should make sure that they are uplifting us back. There's just so many actions that need to be taken. And I think when we have these conversations about what actually needs to be in the curriculum, make sure that the people in the room are actually reflecting the community that is the UK, rather than just having white voices in the room.
That just made me think so much in terms of, having people introduced as role models or heroes or people we should look up to in the first instance, and then discovering the full truth. I can see what you mean about that almost being a betrayal in certain respects in doing it that way. Many historical figures are deeply ambiguous as well, and it may be more appropriate to approach them in that way first. Sadia, anything to build on from what we've heard in terms of the curriculum and what is taught in schools?
I think Lanai and Claire touched on it very, very well, but I just wanted to mention one thing, and because I also did history, and so I could relate to a lot of the things that Lanai said. But it's just, and this is something that came up in the report as well, it's that if you are going to teach us about history, or you want to teach us about our history, to do it through, we want it through a lens where it's truthful. We want to see the truth. That's all we actually want. And yeah, I think that's probably the biggest thing. You don't want to be hearing about your history, your culture from somebody that we've already mentioned hasn't experienced it, doesn't really know much about it, it's not really educated in it, and they're telling it from their lens instead of saying it from your lens. So that's probably the point that I wanted to add.
And so much of the way we teach history is wrapped up within our myths of our nation and how we want to define and build it. So this idea of truth and what really happened versus what we might have liked to have happened, or the stories that we would wish to tell. But that's the job of history, to get closer and closer to the truth, if at all possible. Now, there's a really good question lots of good questions, but there's a good one which is challenging for the system as a whole, because it's referring to leadership. And institutional leadership as well. If you had a chance to talk to head teachers, or in fact, you have a chance, you're now talking to some, I imagine, or college leaders or university leaders, they're in charge of an institution. They will be proud of their institution. It will be hard for them to believe that with the good intent that they have, that there is institutional racism within that organization. How would what might you say to someone who is in a leadership position, perhaps a white leader from a position of privilege, to come to terms with that, and how they might act upon that as well? Who would like to? Again, I'm giving you lots of very broad questions. You're very welcome to pick out specific aspects of it as well. What would you say to a head about institutional racism and their role in that?
I don't mind going for this one. It's very similar to what I kind of mentioned in our last panel event, and it's just to kind of educate yourself, and probably run like some sort of research, to actually find out from people within that institution. So listen to your teachers, listen to your students, find out from them, what their experiences are and what they want to see, the changes that they want to see, because at the end of the day, like, nothing is perfect, and we can always improve. So even if you're an institution that's doing very, very well on what we're talking about here today, there's going to be room for improvement. And we mentioned about different experiences, depending on where you're at, in terms of like location. the experiences of your students are going to be very different to students maybe from another place. And so it's just about finding out really what's needed in your school and working on those things. We've given a lot of recommendations today, but it's about finding out what your students want within your institution and building on this and acting on that. So building on those solutions and just being open to learn, and then being open to act and actually change. I think if I've worded it rightly, I think that's what I'd say.
I see a lot of head teachers who like to describe themselves as lead learners within the school, and I think that role modelling that from what you've described would be powerful. Plus, taking action when required, exactly as was said earlier. Claire or Lanai, would either of you like to come on this with some advice for school or college leaders?
I think my biggest advice would just be to listen. It's very easy to just hear the good things about your place of education, your university, your college, but if you actually want to improve, you need to hear the good and the bad, and from the voices that you are saying that you care about as well. If you're saying that you want to improve the high school for disadvantaged students, make sure that there is a safe space for those disadvantaged students to actually speak. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything out of them, and it will just be a waste of everyone's time. And I think we need to make sure that the students are also getting something out of it. If you're having conversations about Black people, make sure that they're in the room and they actually get to be around when that change happens. There have been so many times where students are asked of the surveyed about what needs to improve, but they never are actually getting to see that improvement, where it's for years to come or generations even. But you need to make sure that there are actual actions that can be taken then and there, as well as in the long term, so that they actually get to benefit from what they've said, from what you've done.
Thank you. Lanai?
I don't think I have anything to add to that one.
There's a lot for school leaders to chew over in there. Now, there's also a question which says you've talked very powerfully about the curriculum and the changes within there, but equally important is the pedagogy and how teachers teach as well. And I've got a personal interest in this from a Teach First perspective. We train teachers. We're actually right in the middle of our summer institute. There's thousands of new teachers from us, but many other routes getting ready to teach here. What would you wish that Teach First and other teacher training providers were teaching new teachers about the roles? You've already, I think, hinted at some advice in here, but I'd love to unpick this about how we should be preparing the teachers of the future to play their role in this as well. And we shall take some of that advice away. I've already taken some of your advice from previous sessions. You talked about doing a Black youth audit, for example, around this, and we've got a proposal actually coming through the system at the moment where we would like to invite you and colleagues in to just look at the way we recruit and teach teachers and tell us what we could do better. So there's an action, but more broadly than that, how would you like to see teaching training prepare teachers to tackle racism? Who'd like to start us on this one? Sadia.
I'll go. I just wanted to say, what we're asking for it's not something big. We're just asking for like small things, and so we want teachers to just come with an open mind and just wanting to learn. And we've already mentioned as well, just wanting to listen. So that's number one. So just actually being willing and actually wanting to improve and change for the better, so they can do well for their students. So that's probably the first thing that I wanted to mention. And the second thing is just small things like Claire mentioned earlier in terms of like names. I think we all have our unconscious biases, and that's a very, very big one, because that impacts the way that we ultimately treat people. And then with teachers, it impacts the way that they will teach their students. And so I think what I want to see in training is things on, unconscious biases, because once you're aware of those biases, you're able to actually do something about them. And then also things on like stereotypes as well, because again, that's another thing that impacts the way that certain teachers will teach their students, and it's something that I've seen in my experiences as well. So those are the two main points that I wanted to add.
So bias, stereotypes, an ongoing attitude of humility, to be continuing to learn and listen as part of it, which can benefit teachers in so many other ways as well. It takes a lifetime to become to be the best teacher that you can possibly be, and if you're open to learning throughout, that's vital. Claire or Lanai, who would like to expand on that? Let me choose. Lanai, you follow up.
I'm aware we don't have much time left.
Yeah.
So I think even the people watching right now, it's really massive that you're taking free time to listen to us. That's a fantastic step, and I think that's just something to continue to reflect, as Sadia says, on our own unconscious bias. We all hold them, and I think as teachers, this is really cliche, but I'm haven't had much sleep, so I don't know a better way to word it. But you're actually changing the world in your role, and you can genuinely have an impact on a student for the rest of their lives. Just one thing you can say, just being there for them, showing them that you will not tolerate racism in your classroom, that you will tell them that this is who you are and who you can be. That can have a massive impact. And so I know teaching is really hard. It's really draining. You can't change the curriculum. We don't expect you to. It's just the way that you are as a teacher. Are you there for your students? That's all you can do until we can eventually change the system as such. But yeah, you're all amazing in the roles that you do. And we celebrate that as much as we're trying to get you to change as well.
And we can sense that celebration within that as well. And that sense that you have power even within a system that constrains you. Claire, this gives you the final word. It has to be a really brief word, unfortunately, because we've overrun. You've got one last message to all of the teachers that are listening. What would you say to them?
I would just say allyship. You need to make sure that you're equipping students with the right terminology. We've thrown out some like unconscious bias. Make sure that the people that you're teaching are supported in the right wording to explain their experiences. Language equips people with the ability to acknowledge those experiences, and I think as an educator, I think it's a big responsibility, but it is one that you can take.
That's the final word on this topic. Thank you, Claire, Lanai, Sadia. That's fantastic. It's fired me up again. I've learned more again from this conversation. I'm so grateful for you spending this time and for your honesty on this. We are done. Thank you very much.
It's my great honour to welcome you all.
It is a very prestigious award. It means the world to me.
They have great senses of humour.
I like to reveal parts of history to them, for I love making history come alive.
They are some of the best people that you can come across.
To help them open their hearts.
I always come back to this quote. How can we be role models to learners if we're not learners ourselves?
It's quite useful to get out of our bubbles, not our COVID ones, and sort of see what else is out there.
By sharing best practice, we can see the whole picture. We can see what really matters.
one of the biggest brains around.
It's easy to forget how much has to happen behind the front lines.
As a global schools group, Cognita educates over 55,000 students across 12 countries. We're proud to be Wellbeing Partner at this year's Festival of Education, and we want to share the work that we're doing to prioritise children's wellbeing. This starts with a clear understanding of what wellbeing is. We looked at the evidence and created a simple Be Well Charter that everyone can use day to day. It gives a clear definition of wellbeing and then focuses on the specific contributors that influence it. Discover our full Be Well Charter video and other resources to use with your students and families at cognita.com.
I really try to not look at myself as just a science teacher. I feel like as a teacher, it's very important to help students grow and develop outside of your lessons. A single teacher believing in you and really believing in you. One teacher doing that can have a large impact, but if you have one or two or three all telling you that and really, really believing in it, it makes you feel like you can achieve anything in the world, honestly.
Shook my hand, no was all he said. Take a load off Fanny, take a load for free. Take a load off Fanny, and you put the load right on me. I picked up my bag, I went looking for a place to hide. When I saw